My sister-in-law said it with a laugh, like it was just harmless gossip. Oh, she only married for money. Everyone knows that. People gave those awkward little chuckles, and I pretended it didn't sting. But it did. It always did. I would have let it go, like I usually do, if it weren't for the call I got a few days later. The credit card fraud department asking about a string of suspicious purchases, charges made in my name, shipped to her address. In that moment, I realized the story she told about me was nothing compared to the one she was desperately trying to hide about herself. Hi, my name is Ava Reynolds, and I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd have to defend why I married my husband. But here I am, 3 years into marriage with Michael, still hearing whispers about my motives. His sister started those whispers, and they've followed me through every family gathering like shadows. She has this way of making accusations sound like casual observations, wrapping cruelty in a smile that makes you question if you heard her correctly. The comment came during our annual family barbecue, delivered with her signature laugh that never quite reached her eyes. Oh, she only married for money. Everyone knows that. She said it while passing the potato chips, like she was commenting on the weather. The relatives within earshot gave those awkward little chuckles people make when they don't know how to respond to uncomfortable truths. I felt my face burn, but I just kept arranging fruit on the platter like nothing happened. I should have said something right then. Should have reminded everyone that Michael and I met when we were both broke graduate students, surviving on ramen noodles and student loans. We fell in love in a cramped library corner, studying until closing time because neither of us could afford decent lighting in our apartments. But she had already moved on to complimenting someone's macaroni salad, acting like she hadn't just planted poison in fertile ground. Confronting her would only make me look defensive. Michael didn't hear it. He was across the yard with his cousins, laughing about some high school football story, completely oblivious to his sister's casual character assassination. I watched him through the kitchen window, his face bright with genuine joy, and felt that familiar, protective ache. He loved his sister unconditionally, the way brothers do. In his mind, she was still the sister who'd helped him with homework and taught him to drive. He couldn't see what I saw. The drive home was quiet, except for Michael's humming along to classic rock. I stared out the passenger window, replaying her words, wondering how many people believed them. Our neighborhood streets looked peaceful in the late afternoon light, lined with modest houses that reminded me why we'd chosen this area. We weren't wealthy by any stretch, just comfortable enough to breathe easily. I wondered if that somehow made me guilty in her eyes. Our house felt like a sanctuary after hours of forced smiles and careful conversation. Michael kicked off his shoes and headed straight for the kitchen, already talking about leftover barbecue for dinner. I loved this about him, how easily he shifted from family chaos back to our peaceful bubble. The walls held only our memories here, only our choices. No judgmental relatives, no poisonous comments disguised as sisterly concern about his wife's supposed gold-digging tendencies. I tried to let it go, the way I always did. Michael's family had never fully embraced me, but I'd learned to navigate their polite distance. His sister was the only one who went beyond cold politeness into something sharper. She had this talent for making me feel like an outsider in my own marriage, questioning motives I'd never questioned myself. But calling me a gold digger felt like crossing a line I hadn't even known existed. The phone call came 3 days later, on a Tuesday morning while I was rushing to get ready for work. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, and I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. Maybe the fact that unknown numbers usually meant something important. The woman's voice was professional but concerned, identifying herself as calling from the credit card fraud department of Chase Bank. My stomach dropped before she even explained why. "We're calling about some suspicious activity on your account," she said, her tone careful and measured. I gripped the phone tighter, my mind racing through recent purchases. Michael and I were careful with our spending, almost obsessively so. We learned that habit during our lean graduate school years and never lost it. The idea of suspicious activity on our account felt impossible, like being accused of a crime you didn't commit. She rattled off a series of purchases: expensive skincare products, designer handbags, jewelry from boutiques I'd never heard of. The amounts made my head spin. Hundreds of dollars here, nearly 1,000 there. All charged to my credit card over the past 2 weeks. All shipped to an address I didn't recognize but somehow felt familiar. My hands started shaking as the pattern became clear, as impossible as it seemed. "Can you repeat that address?" I asked, grabbing a pen with trembling fingers. She read it slowly, and my heart stopped. It was Michael's sister's address, down to the correct apartment number. I'd been there exactly once, for a housewarming party where she'd made pointed comments about how some people could afford nicer gifts than others. Now she was making purchases in my name, having them delivered to her door like some twisted form of revenge. The fraud specialist was patient while I processed the information, probably used to shocked silence from fraud victims. But this wasn't random identity theft. This was personal. Someone had deliberately chosen to steal from me. Someone who sat at family dinners and smiled at my face while planning to destroy my credit. Someone who thought so little of me that ruining my financial reputation seemed like acceptable entertainment. "Do you have any idea who might have access to your card information?" the woman asked gently. I thought about all the times Michael's sister had been in our house, all the moments she could have photographed my wallet or memorized numbers. She'd helped herself to our bathroom, our kitchen, our guest bedroom. I'd trusted her because she was family, because questioning family felt like betraying Michael's love for his sister. I gave the fraud department her name and address, feeling like I was crossing a bridge I could never uncross. They assured me the charges would be investigated and likely reversed, but the damage felt deeper than money. She'd stolen more than credit. She'd stolen my peace of mind, my ability to trust. Every family gathering would now carry this knowledge, this proof that her smiles had always hidden something darker. After hanging up, I sat in my car for 20 minutes trying to figure out how to tell Michael. How do you explain that his beloved sister had committed fraud against his wife? How do you prove that someone he'd loved his entire life had tried to destroy his marriage through financial sabotage? The evidence was clear, but family loyalty runs deeper than facts. I knew this revelation would tear him apart. I called in sick to work and drove aimlessly around our neighborhood, thinking about the barbecue comment that had stung so much 3 days ago. Her accusation about me marrying for money felt like projection now, like someone guilty of financial crimes pointing fingers to deflect attention. Maybe she'd been planning this for months, building a narrative that would make me look greedy and untrustworthy before she actually made me appear so. The irony was almost funny. Almost. She'd accused me of being motivated by money while literally stealing money from me. She'd painted me as a gold digger while digging into my finances for her own benefit. Every cruel comment about my motives had been cover for her own criminal behavior. The woman who questioned my integrity had none herself, and now I had proof. But proof felt like a double-edged sword when it involved family. Michael would be devastated, forced to choose between believing his wife and protecting his sister. Their relationship would never survive this intact, and somehow that felt like another victory for her. Even getting caught, she'd managed to create chaos that would ripple through our marriage for years. Her final manipulation was making me the bearer of truth no one wanted to hear. I thought about all the family gatherings where I'd bitten my tongue, all the small cruelties I'd endured in the name of keeping peace. She'd counted on my silence, my reluctance to cause drama. She'd bet that I'd rather suffer than risk Michael's anger or family division. In some ways, she'd been right. I would have stayed quiet about almost anything to protect his relationships. But stealing from us wasn't a small cruelty or a thoughtless comment. This was criminal behavior that could have destroyed our credit, our ability to buy a house or get loans. She'd risked our entire financial future for designer handbags and expensive skincare. The casual greed was breathtaking, like she'd viewed my credit line as her personal shopping fund. I wondered how long she'd been planning this. The drive home felt surreal, like returning to a world that had shifted while I was away. Our house looked the same, but everything felt different knowing what I now knew. Michael's car was already in the driveway. He'd probably left work early, worried about my sudden illness. I sat in my car for another few minutes, rehearsing words that seemed impossible to say out loud. He met me at the door with concerned eyes and soup from our favorite takeout place, the kind of thoughtful gesture that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with him. His kindness made what I had to tell him even harder. How do you shatter someone's trust in a person they've loved since childhood? How do you prove that family can be capable of betrayal this calculated? We need to talk, I said, setting down my purse with hands that still shook slightly. The fraud department paperwork felt heavy in my bag, evidence of a crime I never thought I'd have to report. Michael's face shifted from concern to confusion, and I knew that in the next few minutes, everything would change. His sister had stolen more than money from us. I took a deep breath and began explaining about the phone call, watching Michael's expression change as each detail sank in. The woman who'd accused me of marrying for money had literally tried to steal our money. The person who questioned my integrity had committed fraud. Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, and sometimes it's just more painful than anything you could imagine. Michael's face went through a series of emotions I'd never seen before. First confusion, then disbelief, then something that looked like physical pain. He set the soup container on our kitchen counter and leaned against it, like he needed support to process what I was telling him. His sister had always been his hero, the person who'd raised him after their parents died in a car accident when he was 15. This revelation wasn't just about fraud. "Are you absolutely sure it was her address?" he asked quietly, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I pulled out the paperwork from the fraud department and watched him read the details with growing horror. His sister's name, her apartment number, the dates that aligned perfectly with her recent social media posts showing off new purchases. The evidence was overwhelming, but I could see him searching for any other explanation. "Maybe someone stole her mail," he suggested, grasping at possibilities that we both knew were unlikely. "Or maybe there's another explanation." But even as he said it, his shoulders slumped with the weight of recognition. He'd seen the expensive bags she'd been carrying lately, the designer clothes that seemed beyond her teacher's salary. We'd both wondered where the money was coming from, but never imagined this. I sat beside him at our small dining table, the one we'd bought secondhand and painted together during our first year of marriage. Everything about our life together had been built slowly, carefully, with money we'd earned honestly. The contrast with his sister's behavior felt stark and painful. She'd taken shortcuts through our trust, our security, our peace of mind. "How do you forgive someone for stealing your sense of safety?" "I have to call her," Michael said, reaching for his phone with shaking hands. I wanted to stop him, to suggest we think through our approach first, but I understood his need for answers. His sister had been his anchor through the worst period of his life. Learning that she'd betrayed us this completely was probably rewriting his understanding of everything. Family loyalty was sacred to him. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, and I could hear her cheerful voice through the speaker. "Hey, little brother, what's up?" She sounded so normal, so innocent, that for a moment I wondered if we'd made a terrible mistake. Maybe there was an explanation that would make this all make sense. Maybe family bonds were stronger than the evidence suggested. Michael's voice caught as he began explaining about the fraud call. I watched his face crumble with each word, watched him hope that his sister would be as shocked as we were. Instead, the line went quiet. The silence stretched so long I wondered if she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed completely. Gone was the cheerful sister, replaced by someone calculating and defensive. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but the words sounded rehearsed. Michael closed his eyes, and I knew he heard it too, the tone that meant she was lying. We'd both heard it before, in smaller situations, but never about something this serious. His sister, the woman who'd raised him, had been planning this betrayal while sitting at our dinner table, pretending to care about our lives. "The fraud department has your address, Sarah," Michael said, using her full name in a way that sounded formal and distant. "They have receipts for deliveries to your apartment." "This isn't a mistake." His voice broke on the last word, and I felt my heart shatter for him. He was losing his sister and his innocence all at once, forced to choose between protecting his wife and protecting his childhood hero. She started crying then, but it felt manipulative rather than genuine. Through her tears, she began a story about financial troubles, about desperate measures, about planning to pay everything back before we noticed. Each excuse felt like another knife in Michael's back. She'd counted on his love for her, betting that family loyalty would outweigh criminal behavior. She'd gambled with our future to fund her present. "I can explain everything," she sobbed into the phone. "I was going to tell you, I was going to fix it. Things have been so hard since the divorce, and I just needed a little help to get back on my feet." But her explanation crumbled under the weight of evidence. These weren't desperate purchases for necessities. They were luxury items, wants disguised as needs, greed dressed up as survival. Michael hung up without saying goodbye, something I'd never seen him do with family. He sat staring at his phone like it had betrayed him, too. The silence in our kitchen felt heavy with the death of illusions. His sister wasn't who he'd thought she was, and our marriage wasn't as secure as we'd believed. Trust, once broken, leaves sharp edges that cut everyone who touches them. "She's been in our house so many times," I said softly, thinking about all the opportunities she'd had to memorize my credit card information. Family dinners where I'd left my purse on the counter, weekend visits where she'd used our bathroom. She'd violated our hospitality in the most calculated way possible. Every smile had been a mask hiding criminal intent. Michael nodded slowly, probably remembering the same moments. "She helped me plan your birthday surprise last year," he whispered. "I gave her my wallet to pick up your gift while I parked the car." The realization that she might have photographed our cards then made everything worse. She'd used his love for me against us both, turning his thoughtfulness into her opportunity. I wanted to comfort him, but I was drowning in my own anger and hurt. His sister had accused me of marrying for money while literally stealing our money. She'd questioned my character while planning crimes against us. Every cruel comment at family gatherings now felt like psychological warfare designed to keep me off balance while she robbed us blind. "What do we do now?" Michael asked, and I heard the little boy in his voice who'd depended on his sister to guide him through tragedy. She'd been his North Star, and now that star had turned out to be a black hole, consuming everything we'd built together. The fraud department would investigate, but the real damage went deeper than money. She'd stolen our trust in family itself. The doorbell rang, startling us both from our grief. Through the window, I could see his sister's car in our driveway. She'd driven straight here, probably planning to spin this situation in her favor. Michael looked at me with eyes full of exhaustion and asked, "Do you want me to handle this?" But I realized I needed to face her myself. "Let me," I said, standing up with determination I didn't know I possessed. For 3 years, I'd let her comments slide, choosing peace over confrontation. But stealing from us crossed every line. She'd counted on my silence, my reluctance to cause family drama. This time, my voice wouldn't stay buried under politeness and fear of making waves. I opened the door to find her standing on our porch with red eyes and a designer handbag I now knew we'd unknowingly purchased. She looked smaller than usual, vulnerable in a way that might have moved me if I hadn't seen the fraud paperwork. Her tears couldn't erase the cold calculation it had taken to plan this betrayal over weeks or months. "Ava, please," she began, but I held up my hand to stop her. For the first time in our relationship, I had the power. She needed something from me. Forgiveness, silence, or just the chance to explain away the unexplainable. But some actions don't deserve explanation, only consequences. Some family bonds aren't worth preserving when they're built on lies. "We trusted you," I said simply, watching her face crumple. Behind me, I could hear Michael's quiet breathing, feel his presence supporting me without words. His sister had tried to drive a wedge between us, but instead she'd forged us into something stronger. Her betrayal had become our unity. Her lies had become our truth. She opened her mouth to speak again, probably to deploy more tears or desperate explanations, but I was done being manipulated by someone who'd smiled while stealing from us. The woman who'd accused me of being motivated by money had revealed her own desperate greed. Now she stood on my doorstep, begging for mercy she'd never shown us. The fraud department has all the evidence, I continued, my voice steadier than I'd expected. This isn't about family anymore. This is about criminal behavior, and we're going to let the law handle it. I saw her face change then, saw the moment she realized that tears and manipulation wouldn't save her this time. Michael stepped up beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. For the first time since I'd known him, he wasn't trying to protect his sister. He was choosing us, choosing our future, choosing truth over family loyalty. His decision felt like a gift I hadn't known I needed. Validation that our marriage could survive even this devastating betrayal. "Sarah, you need to leave," he said quietly to his sister, using her full name again in that formal tone. "And don't contact us while the investigation is ongoing." She looked between us, probably searching for any crack in our united front, any weakness she could exploit. But she'd finally pushed us too far, crossed too many lines. As we watched her drive away, Michael reached for my hand. The gesture was simple, but profound. We were in this together now, whatever came next. His sister had tried to destroy us with her lies about my character and her crimes against our security. Instead, she'd revealed the strength of what we'd built together, the unshakable foundation she could never touch. The next few days felt like living in emotional quicksand. Michael moved through our house like a ghost, going through the motions of normal life while processing the complete destruction of his relationship with his sister. I watched him make coffee, brush his teeth, leave for work, all the familiar routines that now carried the weight of betrayal. He'd lost his only family, and I felt responsible for taking her away from him, even though she'd done it to herself. The fraud department called twice more, requesting additional information and confirming that charges would be reversed. Each conversation felt surreal, discussing my sister-in-law's criminal behavior with strangers who treated it as routine business. To them, this was just another case file. To us, it was the disintegration of everything Michael had believed about family. They assured me the process was straightforward, but nothing about this felt simple. Michael's silence worried me more than anger would have. He wasn't defending his sister anymore, but he wasn't discussing her crimes either. Instead, he retreated into himself, processing grief I couldn't fully understand. I'd never had a sibling, never experienced that particular brand of unconditional love and devastating betrayal. His loss felt profound in ways I could witness but not share, leaving me helpless to comfort him properly. Work became my escape from the tension at home. My colleagues noticed my distraction but didn't pry, sensing that whatever was happening required space rather than questions. I threw myself into projects that demanded focus, grateful for problems with clear solutions. At home, everything felt complicated and painful. At the office, I could pretend to be someone whose family drama didn't involve credit card fraud and criminal investigations. The hardest part was the family fallout we hadn't anticipated. Michael's aunt called, confused about why his sister was suddenly asking to borrow money. His cousins reached out, concerned about some story she'd told them about us cutting her off financially. She was spinning our situation, trying to maintain her victim narrative even as the evidence mounted against her. Each call reminded us how deeply her lies had penetrated the family. Michael finally broke his silence on Thursday evening while we were making dinner. "I keep thinking about when our parents died," he said quietly, chopping vegetables with mechanical precision. She held everything together, made sure I graduated high school, helped me apply for college scholarships. "I can't reconcile that person with someone who would steal from us." His voice carried a bewilderment that broke my heart into smaller pieces. I wanted to tell him that people could be both generous and selfish, protective and predatory, but the words felt inadequate. His sister had been his savior and his destroyer, sometimes simultaneously. Maybe she'd always had this capacity for manipulation, hidden beneath genuine care. Maybe desperation had revealed something that had always existed beneath the surface. Neither possibility offered much comfort. "She saved me then, and she tried to destroy us now," he continued, setting down the knife with hands that trembled slightly. I don't know how to hold both truths at the same time. I realized he was grieving two losses, the sister he'd thought he knew, and the version of his own story that had sustained him through tragedy. She'd rewritten his past by revealing her present capacity for betrayal. The police called on Friday to schedule an interview. Hearing the word detective in connection with my sister-in-law felt like stepping into someone else's life. We weren't the kind of people who dealt with criminal investigations. We paid our taxes, returned lost wallets, held doors open for strangers. Now we were victims in a fraud case, giving statements about crimes committed by family. The surreal nature of our situation kept hitting me in waves. Michael insisted on coming with me to the police station, even though his presence wasn't required. I think he needed to see the process, to understand how seriously the law treated his sister's actions. For weeks, he'd been minimizing her behavior in his mind, looking for ways to excuse or explain it. Sitting in an interview room discussing criminal charges made denial impossible. The detective was kind, but thorough, walking us through evidence that painted a clear picture of premeditated fraud. His sister hadn't made desperate, impulsive purchases. She'd researched expensive items, compared prices, planned deliveries around her work schedule. This wasn't a cry for help. It was calculated theft from people who'd trusted her completely. The organized nature of her crimes felt like another betrayal. "Has she ever exhibited behavior like this before?" the detective asked, and Michael shook his head immediately. But I thought about smaller things: borrowed books never returned, forgotten offers to split dinner checks, casual assumptions that we'd always pay for family outings. Maybe the signs had been there, disguised as thoughtlessness rather than entitlement. Maybe we'd been enabling her for years without realizing it. Driving home from the police station, Michael was quiet again, but this silence felt different, more final. "I think I need to change our locks," he said, as we pulled into our driveway. The practical step felt symbolic. We were securing ourselves against someone who'd had unlimited access to our lives. His sister's key had been a symbol of trust. Now it represented vulnerability. That weekend, we tackled the task of changing every password, every security code, every piece of information his sister might have observed or memorized. It felt like sterilizing our entire financial life, scrubbing away traces of trust that had been violated. Each changed password was an acknowledgement that family didn't guarantee safety, that love didn't prevent betrayal. The hardest part was going through photos on our phones, seeing pictures from family gatherings where his sister smiled beside us, knowing now what she'd been planning. Had she already memorized my credit card numbers when this photo was taken? Was she calculating purchase possibilities while posing for Christmas pictures? The images felt contaminated by hindsight, memories poisoned by knowledge. Michael found a photo from my birthday dinner last year, the one where his sister had helped plan the surprise. She was hugging me in the picture, laughing at something I'd said, looking genuinely happy for us. But now I wondered if she'd been planning even then, if her affection had been performance art designed to maintain access. The uncertainty was almost worse than confirmed malice. "I don't think I can see her again," Michael said suddenly, staring at the photo. "Even if she pays everything back, even if she goes to therapy, I don't think I can trust her around you." His protection felt fierce and necessary, but I also sensed his grief at having to choose between his wife and his sister. She'd forced him into an impossible position, then acted surprised when he chose truth. The credit card company called the following Monday with good news. All fraudulent charges would be reversed, and our credit report wouldn't be affected. The financial damage was being undone, but the emotional aftermath felt permanent. Money could be restored, but trust couldn't be rebuilt through bank transfers. His sister had stolen something more valuable than the dollars she'd spent on designer bags. Michael's aunt called that evening, her voice tight with disapproval. Apparently, his sister had told the family that we were being unreasonable, that she'd made a small mistake, and we were overreacting. The manipulation continued even after being caught, the victim narrative persisting despite overwhelming evidence. I realized she'd probably never take full responsibility, never acknowledge the depth of betrayal she'd committed. "She's family," his aunt said, the phrase carrying weight meant to guilt us into forgiveness. But family had become a complicated word in our house. His sister was family when she raised him after their parents died. Was she still family when she stole from us? Did blood relations excuse criminal behavior? Michael listened to his aunt's lecture with a patience I couldn't muster. After he hung up, we sat in our living room processing the family pressure we'd face. Forgiveness would be expected, demanded in the name of blood ties and holiday gatherings. But forgiveness felt impossible when trust had been so completely destroyed. How do you forgive someone who might still have your financial information memorized? Who might be planning their next manipulation even while apologizing for their last one? They don't understand, Michael said quietly, and I knew he meant his extended family. They think this was about money, but it was about trust. She didn't just steal from us. She planned to steal from us while pretending to care about us. That's not a mistake. It's a betrayal. His clarity surprised me, and I realized he'd been thinking through this more deeply than his silence had suggested. That night, lying in bed, I felt something shift between us. The crisis had forced us to defend our marriage against external attack, and we'd discovered we were stronger than either of us had known. His sister had tried to divide us with accusations about my motives and crimes against our security. Instead, she'd unified us in ways I hadn't expected. "I'm sorry she put you through this," Michael whispered in the dark. "I'm sorry my family became your burden, but she hadn't been my burden. She'd been our test, and we'd passed it together. Her betrayal had revealed the solid foundation we'd built, the trust that could withstand even criminal assault from someone we'd loved. The investigation would continue, charges would probably be filed, and family relationships would remain fractured for years to come. But lying there beside my husband, feeling his steady breathing and solid presence, I realized we'd already won the most important battle. His sister had tried to destroy our marriage with lies and theft. Instead, she'd accidentally proved how strong we really were. 2 weeks after our police interview, Michael's sister sent a letter. Not an email or text that could be ignored, but an actual handwritten letter delivered to our mailbox like something from another era. Michael stared at the envelope for 10 minutes before opening it, and I could see his hands shaking as he unfolded the familiar stationery. Her handwriting was the same careful script that had signed birthday cards and Christmas gifts for years. Even her apology felt like manipulation. The letter was 3 pages of explanation, disguised as confession. She wrote about her divorce, her mounting debts, her desperation to maintain appearances. Each paragraph built a case for sympathy, painting herself as a victim of circumstances rather than the architect of deliberate crimes. She promised to pay everything back, to get counseling, to earn our forgiveness through changed behavior. But nowhere did she acknowledge the depth of betrayal or take full responsibility for her choices. "She still doesn't get it," Michael said, setting the letter down with careful precision. "She thinks this was about money." I watched him process the same disappointment I felt, that even caught and cornered, his sister couldn't grasp what she'd really stolen from us. Trust isn't about dollars and cents. It's about believing the people you love won't deliberately hurt you while smiling at your face. The letter's timing felt strategic, arriving just before the family's annual Easter gathering. His sister knew the holidays brought pressure to forgive, to prioritize family harmony over personal boundaries. She was counting on tradition and guilt to override justice, banking on our desire for peace to trump our need for accountability. Every word felt calculated to exploit Michael's grief and my guilt about dividing the family. Michael called his aunt to decline the Easter invitation, a conversation I could hear through the kitchen wall. His family couldn't understand why we wouldn't give his sister a chance to apologize in person, why we insisted on treating this like a criminal matter instead of a family dispute. They saw our boundaries as overreaction, our need for safety as spite. The pressure to forgive felt almost as violating as the original betrayal. "She made one mistake," his cousin argued during another painful phone call. But it hadn't been one mistake. It had been dozens of calculated decisions over several weeks. One mistake was accidentally grabbing the wrong credit card. This had been systematic fraud disguised as family desperation. The minimization felt like gaslighting, making us question whether our response was proportional to her crimes. I started having nightmares about money disappearing, about checking our accounts to find everything gone. The rational part of my brain knew our finances were secure now, protected by new passwords and constant monitoring. But trauma doesn't listen to logic. Every unexpected charge on our account sent my heart racing. Every unfamiliar number calling our phone triggered panic about new ways she might be undermining our security. Michael noticed my anxiety and suggested we see a counselor together. "This isn't just about her anymore," he said gently. "It's about learning to trust again." The idea of therapy felt both necessary and exhausting. We'd become victims of a crime committed by family, and now we needed professional help to process the aftermath. His sister's actions had ripples we were still discovering. Our first therapy session was harder than expected. Sitting in that office, describing the betrayal out loud to a stranger, made everything feel more real and permanent. The counselor explained that financial abuse by family members creates unique trauma, violating multiple relationships simultaneously. We weren't just victims of fraud. We were survivors of intimate betrayal by someone who was supposed to protect us. Trust is rebuilt in small increments, the therapist explained, but it has to be earned through consistent actions over time. I thought about his sister's letter promising instant change, expecting immediate forgiveness for crimes she'd planned for weeks. Real healing would take years, not apologies. Real trust would require proof, not promises. The work ahead felt daunting but necessary. Michael's nightmares were different from mine. He dreamed about their childhood, about the car accident that killed their parents, about his sister's tears at the funeral. In his dreams, she was always the protector, the responsible one who held everything together. Waking up meant remembering that the same person had systematically stolen from us. The cognitive dissonance was breaking him apart piece by piece. "I keep waiting to wake up and find out this was all a misunderstanding," he admitted during one of our late-night conversations. "Like someone will call and say it was identity theft, that she's innocent." But the evidence was overwhelming, the pattern too clear for denial. His sister had made choices that couldn't be explained away or excused by desperation. The detective called with an update. His sister had been formally charged with credit card fraud. Hearing those words spoken officially made everything feel final in a way I hadn't expected. She was no longer just Michael's sister who'd made poor choices. She was a defendant in a criminal case, someone the state considered dangerous enough to prosecute. The legal system was treating her actions as seriously as we did. Michael took the news quietly, but I could see him processing another layer of loss. His sister wasn't just someone who'd betrayed us. She was someone facing potential jail time because of choices she'd made. The guilt he felt was irrational, but powerful. He wondered if he could have prevented this somehow, if there were signs he'd missed or conversations he should have initiated. "This isn't your fault," I reminded him for the 100th time. "You didn't make her choices." But family guilt runs deeper than logic. He'd been her little brother first, her responsibility during his teenage years. Now he was the victim of her crimes. And the role reversal felt wrong in ways that kept him awake at night. Our house felt different now, more like a fortress than a home. We'd installed a security system, changed the locks twice, and opened new bank accounts. Each precaution was necessary, but exhausting. A constant reminder that safety wasn't guaranteed even from people who claimed to love us. The sanctuary we'd built together had been violated by someone with unlimited access and bad intentions. I found myself studying other family relationships differently, wondering how many people harbored secret resentments or hidden agendas. Had his sister always felt entitled to our resources? Had her care for Michael during their teenage years been genuine love or calculated investment in future access? The questions felt paranoid but necessary, protective measures for a heart that had been burned. Friends who heard our story had predictable reactions. Some expressed outrage on our behalf, validating our feelings and supporting our boundaries. Others suggested forgiveness and second chances, uncomfortable with the permanent nature of our decision. "But she's family," they'd say, as if blood relations excused criminal behavior. The divided responses showed us how differently people valued safety versus harmony. Michael's work performance suffered as he processed everything. His concentration was shot, his usual optimism replaced by a wariness that felt foreign on his face. I watched him struggle with meetings and deadlines that had never been difficult before. Betrayal trauma was rewiring his brain, making trust feel dangerous in all areas of life. The ripple effects kept expanding beyond our marriage. 3 months after the initial fraud call, Michael made a decision that surprised me. "I want to write to her," he said one evening. "Not to forgive her, but to explain why I can't." The letter he wrote was different from hers. No excuses, no manipulation, just honest pain expressed clearly. He needed her to understand that their relationship had ended not from anger, but from the impossibility of rebuilding trust. He read me the letter before sending it, and I heard 3 decades of love dying in his words. "You taught me that family protects family," he wrote. "Then you taught me that lesson was wrong. I can't reconcile those truths, so I have to choose safety over sentiment." His grief was profound and necessary, mourning not just his sister, but his belief in unconditional family loyalty. The response came quickly. Another letter full of tears and promises, this time threatening suicide if he didn't forgive her. The manipulation was so transparent, it felt almost insulting to our intelligence. She was using the ultimate emotional blackmail, trying to make her potential self-harm our responsibility. The counselor helped us understand this as another form of abuse, using guilt to control our choices. "She's not going to hurt herself," the therapist explained. "She's trying to regain control of the narrative." The relief I felt was immediate and shameful. I hadn't realized how much her threat had scared me. Even knowing she was manipulative, the possibility of her death felt like something we'd have to carry forever. Her threats were working exactly as intended. Michael didn't respond to the suicide threat, a decision that cost him weeks of sleep but preserved our boundaries. Refusing to be manipulated felt like another small victory, another step toward healing. We were learning to recognize her tactics and resist them, building immunity to emotional blackmail through practice and support. Each boundary maintained made the next one easier to enforce. Spring turned to summer, and slowly our house began to feel like home again. Michael's nightmares decreased, my anxiety attacks became less frequent, and we started talking about vacation plans instead of security measures. The healing wasn't linear or fast, but it was real. We were building something new on the foundation that had survived her assault, something that felt stronger for having been tested. His sister's criminal trial was scheduled for fall, and we'd been warned we might need to testify. The thought of seeing her again filled me with dread, but also with a strange sense of closure. She'd face consequences for her actions in a forum that couldn't be manipulated by tears or family pressure. Justice might not heal our wounds, but it would validate our experience in ways that mattered. The trial date arrived on a crisp October morning, 6 months after that first fraud department phone call that had changed everything. Michael and I sat in the courthouse parking lot for 10 minutes, gathering courage to face his sister across a courtroom. She'd plea bargained down to a lesser charge, avoiding the spectacle of a full trial. But we still needed to give victim impact statements. The building felt intimidating, all marble and authority, nothing like the family dinners where this had all begun. Inside, his sister looked smaller than I remembered, sitting beside her attorney in a navy blue suit that made her appear both professional and vulnerable. She didn't meet our eyes when we entered, focusing instead on papers spread across the defendant's table. 6 months of legal proceedings had aged her, carved worry lines that hadn't been there during family barbecues. I wondered if she understood yet what she'd really cost us. The judge was efficient and kind, explaining the process with patience that suggested she'd guided many families through similar betrayals. Financial crimes between relatives were apparently more common than I'd realized, a depressing reality that somehow made our situation feel less uniquely devastating. We weren't the first family destroyed by greed disguised as desperation, and we wouldn't be the last. The universality was both comforting and heartbreaking. When my turn came to read my victim impact statement, my voice was steadier than I'd expected. I'd written about sleepless nights and anxiety attacks, about the security system we'd installed, and the trust we'd lost. But mostly I wrote about the death of family innocence, about learning that love doesn't prevent betrayal. The words felt powerful leaving my mouth, like reclaiming narrative control from someone who'd tried to define our story. Michael's statement was shorter, but more devastating. He spoke directly to his sister for the first time in months, his voice carrying the weight of childhood memories and adult disappointment. "You taught me to trust family above everyone else," he said, his words echoing in the courtroom silence. "Now I have to teach myself that family can be the most dangerous enemy." His sister finally looked up then, tears streaming down her face. Her own statement was predictably focused on her financial struggles and emotional breakdown following her divorce. She apologized profusely, promising restitution and therapy, painting herself as someone who'd lost control rather than someone who'd made calculated choices. The performance felt familiar. Tears and promises designed to elicit sympathy rather than accept responsibility. Even facing sentencing, she couldn't resist trying to manipulate the narrative one final time. The judge sentenced her to 18 months probation, community service, and mandatory restitution of all stolen funds plus penalties. No jail time, which felt both merciful and insufficient. The money would be returned, but the damage to our family would remain permanent. Justice in family crimes felt complicated, measured in dollars recovered rather than relationships restored. How do you quantify the cost of destroyed trust? Outside the courthouse, Michael's aunt approached us with tears and accusations. "You've destroyed this family," she said, as if we'd committed the crime rather than reported it. The blame felt surreal but expected. Family loyalty often trumps justice in people's minds. We were the troublemakers for refusing to sweep criminal behavior under the rug of holiday traditions. Standing up for ourselves had made us the villains in some family members' stories. "She destroyed herself," Michael replied quietly, his voice carrying new authority that surprised even me. "We just refused to help her cover it up." The months of therapy and boundary setting had changed him, given him language for truths he'd never had to speak before. His sister's betrayal had forced him to choose between enabling her behavior and protecting his marriage. The choice had been clearer than the aftermath. The drive home was peaceful in a way I hadn't expected. The legal proceedings were finished, the restitution process would begin, and we could finally move forward without waiting for courts and lawyers. Michael reached over to squeeze my hand at a red light, a simple gesture that carried enormous weight. We'd survived the worst betrayal either of us could imagine, and our marriage had emerged stronger rather than broken. That evening, we celebrated with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant and a bottle of wine we'd been saving for a special occasion. It felt strange to commemorate the end of something so painful, but closure deserved recognition. His sister would remain part of our story, but she wouldn't define our future. The narrative belonged to us now, free from her manipulation and family pressure to forgive the unforgivable. Michael called his cousin that weekend to explain our boundaries going forward. No holiday gatherings that included his sister, no family updates about her life, no pressure to reconcile for the sake of tradition. The conversation was difficult but necessary, drawing lines that would protect our healing. Some family members would respect our decisions. Others would see us as unforgiving and cold. We were learning to live with both reactions. Our house felt like home again, not a fortress requiring constant vigilance. The security system remained, but it felt like sensible precaution rather than desperate protection. We'd replaced the violated sanctuary with something new, a space built on hard-won wisdom rather than naive trust. The foundation was different now, reinforced by survival rather than assumption. Sometimes destruction creates opportunities for better construction. I thought about the woman who'd answered that fraud department call months ago, how unprepared she'd been for the devastation that followed. That version of myself had still believed in family immunity, in blood bonds stronger than greed. The woman I'd become was wiser but sadder, protected but less trusting. Growth through trauma felt like victory and loss simultaneously. Necessary but costly in ways I was still calculating. Michael started sleeping through the night again, his dreams no longer haunted by childhood memories twisted into adult betrayals. I watched him laugh at television shows, focus on work projects, plan our anniversary dinner with enthusiasm I hadn't seen in months. His healing was visible in small moments, ordinary gestures that proved we were building something sustainable. The nightmares were ending, replaced by dreams we chose together. We found new traditions to replace the family gatherings we could no longer attend safely. Friends became our chosen family, relationships built on mutual respect rather than biological obligation. The holidays looked different now, smaller but more authentic, filled with people who'd proven their trustworthiness through actions rather than inherited through genetics. Sometimes family is what you build rather than what you're born into. The restitution payments arrived monthly, automated transfers that appeared in our account without fanfare or apology notes. The money felt contaminated somehow, tainted by the methods used to steal it originally. We decided to donate each payment to a financial literacy nonprofit, turning her theft into something that might help others avoid similar manipulation. Transforming her crime into education for vulnerable people felt like reclaiming power. Spring returned with fresh possibilities and hard-earned peace. Michael planted a garden in our backyard, something he'd always wanted to try but never found time for. Watching him nurture seedlings into flowering plants felt symbolic of our own growth process. We were cultivating something beautiful from ground that had been scorched, proving that healing creates space for new life. The metaphor wasn't lost on either of us. His sister sent one final letter, announcing her completion of court-ordered therapy and requesting a chance to rebuild our relationship. The letter felt different, less manipulative, more genuinely remorseful. But therapy for her didn't undo trauma for us, and changed behavior from a distance couldn't restore trust destroyed by proximity. Some bridges burned too completely for reconstruction, leaving only the wisdom of knowing when to walk away. Michael read her letter once and filed it away without responding. "I hope she's actually changed," he said, "but that's for her next relationships to discover." The boundary felt healthy rather than cruel, protective rather than punitive. We weren't responsible for her rehabilitation or redemption, only for our own healing. Sometimes love means letting go completely, allowing someone to face consequences without your intervention or forgiveness. Our anniversary arrived with unexpected joy, unmarked by the crisis that had dominated the previous year. We went to the restaurant where we'd had our first date, remembering why we'd fallen in love before family drama complicated everything. The conversation flowed easily, filled with future plans rather than past wounds. We were still us beneath all the trauma, still the couple who'd chosen each other when we had nothing. "I'm proud of us," Michael said over dessert, his words carrying weight accumulated through months of difficult choices. We'd protected our marriage against assault from someone who should have cherished it instead. We'd chosen truth over peace, safety over tradition, healing over convenience. The decisions had been painful, but necessary, laying groundwork for decades of trust we could build together. That night, lying in our bed in our secure house surrounded by relationships we'd chosen and cultivated, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year: complete peace. His sister's betrayal had been devastating, but it hadn't been permanent. We'd survived her worst intentions and emerged with something stronger than what we'd started with. The test had been cruel, but we'd passed it together. The phone rang as we were drifting off to sleep, a number we didn't recognize displaying on the caller ID. For just a moment, my heart raced with familiar anxiety, wondering what new crisis might be demanding our attention. Then Michael reached over to turn off the ringer with a smile that told me he felt it too. We were safe now, protected by boundaries we'd learned to maintain and trust we'd earned through surviving the unthinkable. Some stories end with forgiveness and reconciliation, families reunited through understanding and growth. Ours ended with wisdom and protection, a marriage strengthened through shared survival of intimate betrayal. We'd learned that family isn't always safe, that love doesn't prevent theft, that trust must be earned rather than assumed. The lessons were painful but valuable, foundation stones for whatever came next in our carefully reconstructed life.